Hello and welcome back to the Rossi Brothers Sports Podcast. My name is John, joined as always by my brother Adam. And today we're joined by a special guest, Adam.
That's right. We are really pleased today to be joined by Mr. Joel Goldberg. Mr. Goldberg was born in New Jersey and spent time in Chicago before going to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After working broadcasting jobs in Wisconsin and St. Louis, Joel moved to Kansas City, where he currently lives with his wife and two children. Joel hosts the Royals Live pregame and postgame shows for the Kansas City Royals. He also does play-by-play announcing for the Kansas City Mavericks ice hockey team, hosts a podcast, has written a book, and makes appearances as a public speaker and presenter. In 2001, Joel was honored with a Mid-America Emmy Award. Welcome, Joel, and thank you so much for being with us today on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, John. Great to be with you guys today.
Yeah. So I got to ask before I ask anything else, I'm a big college football fan, and one of my bucket list items is to attend a Wisconsin-Madison football game, specifically because between the third and fourth quarters, I've seen YouTube videos of this playing jump around and having everyone in the stadium jump around. I would assume you've been there present for that event.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember listening to jump around in college at parties. That was not a regular part of the game day routine. There was no jump around. I think we jumped around just about every other song. Point being that it is a fun, wild, raucous atmosphere with or without that song. I don't know what year, you'd have to Google it, that it came in, but maybe somewhere in the later 1990s or early 2000s, probably later 1990s, where that just became an institution. But I will say, I've been back to enough games where it's a sight to see. Yeah. And it is definitely every bit of what the hype is. It never disappoints. But that's, even before that was going on there, it's always a spectacle because good games, bad games, good teams, bad teams, the students, which is very much the just the way things are in the state in general, they like to have fun.
I definitely get that impression from what I've heard from there. Well, super cool.
It's like an unmatchable atmosphere, having
it is
all
it's
that,
fun.
So, yeah.
So tell us, how did you get into broadcasting?
I wanted to do it from the time I was little, and I don't know, I never quite can pinpoint what age. I just can pinpoint that somewhere between first and second grade. And I know that because my first grade teacher moved up with us to second grade. And I just know that she's the one, my parents would say, she's the one that was always saying, Joel just never stops talking about sports. And he's always driving us crazy, every morning telling us about last night's game. So I knew that early on, even though maybe at 7 or 8 years old, I didn't say, okay, I want to be a broadcaster. I know not too long after that, I would sit in front of the TV and turn the volume down and pretend like I was announcing games and take notes on everything. And that went through all of high school. So I think it's something that I always wanted to do. I was a mediocre athlete at best, so I knew that wasn't going to be an avenue. And I never really thought about doing anything else. I mean, I always sort of thought, well, if this doesn't work out, what will I do? And I never quite had an answer, but it was certainly a dream of mine from a pretty young age. And then as I got closer to making it happen, I just kind of went all in and did whatever it took to get there.
And here I made it happen. That's pretty cool.
Indeed. Was it always like baseball games early on in childhood like that, or
anything
any sport you could find? Yeah.
Anything really. I mean, for me, I think it was any of the big sports. So whether that was, I don't know that I had a true love. I think as kids growing up in the Philadelphia area over on the New Jersey side, we probably went to more Phillies games than anything else. We moved when I was 13, but we went to Phillies games, we went to Flyers games, we went to Sixers games, we went to Eagles games. Getting a ticket to a football game was probably a little bit more difficult. Getting a ticket to a baseball game, just like today, a little bit easier. I think my mom had a hookup with someone at work that we ended up at a lot of hockey games, which was awesome. So it didn't matter to me. I mean, I don't, now I can certainly admit that I know less about all those other sports than the average sports fan because I just don't have time to pay attention to them. So I do when I can versus living the baseball life every single day. But it was really 14 years ago when I'd been working in St. Louis doing multiple sports but more of a focus my last few years on baseball, coming here for a strictly baseball job. And so, I mean, I'm, the first almost half of my career, less than that now, I did anything and everything. And a lot of that was being in local news. And so it might be the high school basketball game. It might be a feature story on the star wrestler or swimmer or whatever it was. I mean, you name, there's really not a sport that I haven't done something in at some point, but baseball has obviously become the focus.
Yeah. Is that because you really enjoyed baseball more so than the others, or is that just kind of how life happened?
No, probably. I think probably more the latter, Adam. I mean, I could truly say that if the path had taken me down a route of being around the NFL every day, that's what it would have been. There were certainly points along the way where I was spending, if not equal parts, a lot of time around the NHL, and always felt like if I had my pick, I would choose to live the Major League Baseball or NHL life every single day. I think from a hockey standpoint, I've been a hockey guy my whole life. My son plays. My kids have sort of been raised as hockey fans in a different way than they've been raised baseball fans, because they understand that while they're huge baseball fans, or at least my son is, my daughter maybe not as much, and even my wife, that it's work and it's business every day. It's great work. And so hockey has kind of been, especially when we moved to Kansas City in 2008, hockey was sort of the one team that we took with us from St. Louis because there wasn't an NHL team here. Mm-hmm. And so we're huge Blues fans. So that's, I think I have a huge passion, always have, for hockey. And I think it would be different if I was around it every day, because it would be more business. So I allow myself to be an invested fan with that, versus baseball. Of course, I'm a fan of the game. I think it's probably my first true love. It's the sport that I played, again, not at a very high level, but just like most kids, starting off in, T-ball and all that, and playing it all, all growing up and watching all the games and going all to the games. So I think that, and I always believed this too, if whatever sport I ended up in, if it was going to be a specific sport, was going to be my favorite sport. Because if you can't have that kind of passion for this type of profession, you probably need to get out of it. It's like, oh man, I have to talk about baseball every day. Well, if you're saying that, you probably shouldn't be involved in it. My whole feeling is, can you believe that they pay me to talk about baseball every single day? It's a pretty good thing.
Amen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went to West Virginia University, and the dean of the honors college, he always used to say, like, he was from across the pond. He'd say, now the trick is in life, find the idiot who would pay you what you would do for free. That's the trick. And it seems like you definitely found it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because when you're, of course, when you're younger, you're like, I would do this for free. And it's exactly what he's saying. And the point, which you guys know, and we all know, is that life is so much better when you get to do what you enjoy. And then the reality of it is that, if you're good at it, you stay in it, you treat people right, you take it seriously, that the money will come at some point. So I don't know that I ever did it for free. But, I'd say my first television job in 1994 did pay $13,500 a month. So, when you're taking home less than $1,000 a month, that was pretty close to free back then.
Well,
gotcha. Wow.
What so yeah, I'm sure that, like any job, there are probably aspects of it that when people are just sitting at home watching game, wow, Joel Goldberg, there he is, or hearing the voice, but there's so much behind the scenes stuff that doesn't go on. Could you just take us through, like, what is the life of a broadcaster like? You wake up in the morning and what happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think in some ways, like anything else, it's not as big of a deal to me as it is to everyone else, understandably. I think my profession, and I'll give you a little bit of what goes on, but I think my profession is very much like, it doesn't necessarily have to be other high profile professions, but any type of profession that people know, or at least think they know what that person does. Like if you say to somebody, hey, what do you do? Like, well, I'm the, chief organizational blah 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 involved in chemical development of like there are a lot of jobs where you're like, I got this buddy and I think he's in something in the medical field, but I don't really know what he does, even though he's told me. There isn't a whole lot of confusing what I do. So, you generally know what a doctor does, unless it's some funky title and some specialty that you've never heard of, and fortunately have never heard of before. You generally know what a lawyer does. You know what a teacher does. I think people know what broadcasters do. They see us and hear us every single night, and if they don't see and hear me, they go, "Oh wow, that really, you're on TV? That's awesome." Once you get past all of that, it's work. It's the best work, but there's nothing about it, at least for me, 26 years in, that makes me be like, "Oh my gosh, really?" Like it's like getting in your car and driving every day. I mean, it's just muscle memory. It's what I do. But I think the thing that people don't know, and there's a long way of me getting back to your question, Adam, is that there is so much work that goes into it. So, you wake up, we're all different. I mean, every single one of the guys that I work with have a different routine. Over the course of the day, you're certainly going to scour social media for any developments going on, and certainly have your alerts on for anything that may need to be addressed right away. You're going to sort of game plan a little bit. What do I want to talk about today? What are we doing? You're going to read up on maybe the other team and see what's going on with your team. Although when you spend every single day on it, it becomes easier. Like, I don't need to learn about our guys because I already know about our guys. And in some cases, some of those players I've been around for 10, 11, 12 years. But you kind of feel things out that way. You might make some phone calls. In this day and age of COVID, there are going to be random Zoom calls that pop up in the day. Instead of, hey, be at the stadium at this time and the clubhouse opens at this time, it might be, okay, the manager's talking on Zoom at 2:10 and this player's talking at 2:40. And then you might have a producer. I've got two producers. I've got my pre and post game show producer is one, and he'll send us, my analyst and I, he'll send us an email somewhere for a night game later morning with a rundown of everything we're going to do on our pregame show. If we have something we want to do differently, we will reach out to him and tell him, hey, I think we're missing this, or I don't like that. But for the most part, he's really good that his stuff is not needing a whole lot of editing, if any at all. If we need to jump on a meeting and discuss it further, we will. But we have such a great chemistry, all of us, that we thankfully, unlike other markets, don't meet a whole lot. And then, you may start making some other phone calls during a normal season, non-COVID times. You're getting to the ballpark and you're talking to anyone and everyone. And that's the thing that people don't see. Not just interviews with microphones and faces, but just BSing with guys about life or about something since the last time you saw them because they got traded to whatever team. And you're talking to other teams' broadcasters and writers and on and on and on. So, it's a lot of networking. It's a lot of kind of schmoozing. And then, the second producer is our game producer. And at some point later in the afternoon, he's going to say, what do you got for me today? Which translation means, what 2 or 3 stories would you like to talk about as an in-game report? And I'll pitch those ideas to him and he'll say yes or no, or, hey, can you go look for me, an answer on this guy's health or blah, blah, blah. And so it's sort of a touch and go thing every single day. And then once the game starts, you're reacting to what's going on. And then the post game, you're reacting and covering what went on, and then you go home and you do it again the next day.
Wow. There it is.
Does it get difficult at times to have different reactions, things to different stories to pitch every game and things to say, because I can imagine sitting at home, it's probably really easy to be like, oh, well, I would have, said something this way or whatever. Yes. When you were watching one game, but throughout the course of a whole season, that takes a lot of creativity on its own, I would guess.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, John, because I think it's funny. Our play-by-play guy on television has always said that he thinks that my job is harder than his. I disagree with him on that because, he needs to be prepared for any situation that comes up at any moment of the game, which means that he has to have some level of understanding of, the mop-up bullpen guy. He has to have a level of understanding of, just random guys on the coaching staff from the other team or who knows what, because, unlike hockey, there is a lot of dead time in baseball and he and his partner have to fill that. And I don't. his point, I know, is that we have to generate ideas and storylines every single day that aren't necessarily reacting to what's going on in front of us. And so that's your point. And it just, it kind of comes and goes. I mean, there are certain moments where you're like, I've got 10 ideas today. And, which 2 or 3 can I get in and which can I hold on to? Last week I was talking to our first base coach about something on the phone. And I said, hey, let me ask you about this player. And I mean, he's a better runner than people think, isn't he? And suddenly he starts explaining, he's a base running coach too, what makes him so good and the fundamentals and what the approach is. And he hasn't really been on base in the right situation, or when he's been on base, it wasn't the right moment to break in and do a story, because maybe, we were 1 pitch away from a home run swing changing the game or whatever. And so there's a touch and feel to it. So you kind of file that one away, and you're like, on a rainy day, so to speak, you're like, oh, I still have that one available. And so you're a little bit ahead. And then there are other days where you're like, I don't really know if I have anything, and that becomes a lot harder during 2 occurrences. One is during a losing streak, where they're just, things just aren't upbeat and cheery, and there's not that every story needs to be positive, but when you're losing, it can oftentimes turn into a broken record. And it's like, wait, we already did this story yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before. So you got to figure out some other things. And you start researching some stuff. You start talking to people and start going down some rabbit holes. And suddenly you're like, oh, wait a minute, here's something interesting. And then, the other time it gets difficult is just in general right now because of COVID. I can't walk into a clubhouse, a locker room. And sometimes I walk in, I just see a guy and I just start BSing with him, and suddenly some stuff comes up, and I don't have that ability right now. So it's more Zoom calls, and it's, every now and then I'll pick up the phone and text one of the players and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes to chat? I know you're busy, but do you have a good time? And they'll almost always get back to me, at least the ones that have been around. The newer players I never met face to face because of COVID. And so you leverage those relationships, but you can't go to the well too many times or they're going to stop returning that phone call. That's what I miss from being in the locker room, and those are the tough times. So yes, it's a constant battle every single day. I think the nice thing about it is, having done this for 26 years, with this being my 14th year with the Royals, I learn something new every day. I'll stumble into stories I've never heard or told before, but there's not a whole lot that phases me. So there's not a whole lot that can panic me. I'll give you guys this example. It's a long-winded answer, but I don't have a producer yelling at me to wrap it up. So, which is bad for you guys. But
keep it coming. This is great.
This is great. This is what we're here to do.
Yeah. Last week I had a story ready to go, and our rhythm is, and other markets are different, but I will generally do my first in-game report, the first of 2, 3, 4 of them, in the second inning. Top of the second, it depends on it. If it's about our pitcher and we're at home, then it'll be top of the second when he's on the mound, or, whenever it's appropriate. So you kind of pick that first story to be a little bit more of an overview, or maybe about the pitcher, or like if it's about our leadoff hitter, it's not going to work because he's batting in the first inning. And the first inning doesn't work for those reports because they have to get out the lineups and all the setting up the game and all the graphics and sponsored things. So the second inning is what works, and that's where they see me on camera. And then when I return for later hits, it's usually audio only. And then there's a preview in the end of the 7th inning about the post-game show coming up, and that's on camera. So anyway, I got the top of the second report ready to go. Starting pitcher named Daniel Lynch. It's his second ever start. He's the top Royals pitching prospect, pitched fairly well in his first outing. And, I have a whole routine at home, and my broadcast partner too. We do our pregame show on a set out in left field. As soon as the pregame show ends, and then the game starting 10 minutes later, he and I go back to the press box and we eat dinner. And then by the time the first inning's over, I have to be back out in left field to do that report. So if it's a really quick, like 8-pitch first inning, I'm eating in about 3 minutes and hightailing it back out there. If it goes longer, I got a chance to breathe a little bit. That's fine. And so have that routine down. Well, I'm sitting there, the inning's going long, and the poor kid just had a bad outing. It happened to be his second outing. can't get out of the first inning. And so he gives up, I think, 7 or 8 runs in the first inning. By the time he's faced his 10th or so batter, they pull him out. And my report was going to be about him pitching in front of a big crowd. In his first start in the big leagues, there were like 7,000 there, COVID numbers. Well, it's a Monday night. He's like, this is the biggest crowd I've ever pitched in front of. So the irony wasn't lost on us that, you know, on a normal night, non-pandemic, it could be 25, 30, 35,000 fans. Well, they're expecting 15, 16,000 fans for his second game. It's a weekend. The weather's warming up, and he doesn't get out of the first inning. So my report was going to be on all of that and dig in a little bit. Well, now he's not in the game anymore. So I'm walking out to left field, and I'm texting my producer, and I'm just saying, that's not going to work. And he goes, no. What else do you got? And I'm like, well, we can do an injury update on the shortstop who's been on the injured list, but I think they might bring in this other pitcher. He looks like he's warming up right now. And I think I got something on him from the past. I could throw that in there. So we're in the middle of a commercial break, and he's like, do you got anything or no? I'm like, hold on. I'm looking at my notes. No, I'm good. And like 20 seconds before I decided what I was going to do. And then we, but see, that's, I couldn't have done that years ago. But that's where I say I might learn something new every day, and I see new things every day. But there aren't it's rare that I get into a situation that would frazzle me because I've seen it before. So it's like, okay, this didn't work out. What else are we going to do now? And that's the beauty of this job, where once it becomes work that you are confident in, you stop worrying so much about, oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? Oh, what if this goes wrong? And what if this goes wrong? And it just, you know, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, like John, you also talked about like tough situations. You know, as we are recording this right now, the Royals, who before their current losing streak began, had the best record in baseball. Now they've lost 8 in a row. And it's like, sometimes I feel like my friends or even family are trying to check on my well-being. And I'm like, guys, I've been through every type of winning and losing streak before. I've been through every 100-loss team in a world championship before. None of this phases me at all. It's certainly easier when they're winning, but I'm good as long as I can bring my energy and make sure that we are bringing to people whatever's going on with this team, good or bad, without moping about it. Worry about somebody that's in a slump right now. I'm not the guy you got to worry about.
Well, yeah, it is a tough streak right now if they can turn it around here. But man, your words bring me hope. Like maybe in 14 years, the Ross Rose Sports Podcast, I'll finally feel comfortable going into doing an interview like this.
Yeah, but you know, like it's like anything else in life. Like you stop making it a bigger deal than it is once you're comfortable with it. And there's no switch. You don't just go from one day to the next being like, okay, I got it all figured out. It's just a gradual thing. And if you do it long enough, then one, I like to call it, it's like at bats. You have enough at bats to have that repertoire, to have that memory of going back to moments where you can reflect on and take that experience, good and bad. You also find that the longer you do it, you don't beat yourself up when you screw things up, because I make mistakes on the air every single night. And it's rare that any of them stick with me for very long. Whereas in the past, when I was younger, I could lose sleep over it at night, and maybe it might even wear on me for a number of days. Now it could be gone in a matter of moments or within the hour or whatever it is. It's just because you have this knowledge and this experience of having survived it before. Mm-hmm. And so you spend less time questioning, am I good enough? Do I sound right? Am I this? Am I that? Doesn't mean you don't want to keep trying to get better. And the other side to that too is if you keep doing it this long, someone will tell you that you don't belong eventually if it's not right. So if they keep hiring you, or if they keep listening, or they keep watching, or they keep whatever it is, if you're there long enough, it's because you're good enough. So, you know, that's just that to me is just the experience and the luxury of having done this so long that I have all of that to fall back on.
Yeah, I heard one time somebody say, you know, if you look at any YouTube video and look at the comments below, like half of them are going to be positive and about half are going to be negative. And that's just like the way it goes. but you just got to tune out the negative and be your best self. Like you said, continue to improve, but at the same time, not let the naysayers get to you. Cool.
And for the most part, none of that matters. It's all
Right.
self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm.
It is like, and you know, you guys were talking before about what'd you say? Like oh, something about like sitting at home and saying, well, I would have done it this way, or I would have done it that way. And like, you know, I think when you're inexperienced, you're like, boy, I wonder what people are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm just like, I don't really give a crap. I mean, like,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to feedback. It just means that most of it's not constructive. It's just opinion. I mean, we're all, this includes you guys with a podcast, we're all in a subjective field. So, I mean, how can you go find anyone's favorite broadcaster, and I guarantee you within a matter of minutes, you can find someone that equally hates that person.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, some of the greatest broadcasters in the history of the world, of this country, in baseball, were disliked by someone, despised by someone. And it's like, okay, so what does that really mean? Probably not much of anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hurdle to get past too. So once you get past that, these are all distractions, and they're all self-inflicted, like I said. So once you know how to manage those and recognize them for what they're worth, they just become less clutter in your head. You're better at your job then.
Yeah. It makes me think of, I did mock trial as a younger student in high school, and they like, if something wouldn't be, this is totally random, but if something wouldn't be like rejected by the judge or whatever, but they like didn't put much weight to it, they would say like, oh, we accept this, but we'll like give it its due weight or something. It's like the same thing of negative comments, like, yeah, you know, I'll take some feedback, but also not weigh it too heavily or anything. So, but you mentioned a little bit.
Hey, John, I was just saying, I think that's a good point too. And I'm not saying like ignore it all. I'm saying take it for what it's worth. Some of it might be very worthwhile. And so it's how you process it. And, you know, I'll just give you this quick example. Like, I think social media is a great way to put it. There are a lot of trolls on Twitter, and they're not necessarily even all trolls. Some of them just really don't understand the game. Some of them may understand it better than me, by the way, too. But a lot of them don't understand the game, and some of what they come up with is just preposterous and overreacting. And it's like suddenly you're the best team, and now you're going to lose 100 games. And I mean, it's so preposterous. Sometimes I don't even know if it's sarcastic or serious. But you can pretty much see, social media or not, who, when they enter your world or comment or whatever it is, brings zero value. And the mute button on social media, at least on Twitter, is a beautiful thing, because if I look and it's just cluttering up my inbox and it's taking up too much of my headspace, I'll just mute them. Like, you'll need to be friends and comment and exchange with everybody. So you find of all of that, just like, you know, with the debate stuff or whatever, you find what is useful. You use it. That can be positive or negative, and you push the rest of it aside.
Amen. Yeah.
Easy.
I was gonna bring up a point you mentioned earlier too, that you're saying, right, in your opinion, it's harder for the play-by-play guy or something. And so you've done a bit of play-by-play in like spring training and stuff before. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've done some spring training.
What was that experience like? And how is that part of why you say maybe that you think he has a harder job or something? Or
not so much that. I mean, I think it would still get back to what I was saying before. Like, I just don't have the amount of reps of doing that I do. You know, I've done thousands of shows. If you told me right now that in 5 minutes the play-by-play guy is going down and you got to do play-by-play, you know, there'd be some butterflies and some scrambling. If you told me in 5 minutes that, hey, by the way, we're moving the pregame show up, we haven't discussed anything yet, but go, I could do that with my eyes closed. And
gotcha.
And I could do it without a script or even without a note if need be, because I've been there so many times. So, you know, in some ways I say that the play-by-play job is harder because it's just one that I haven't done as much of. And I'd say too, but I've done some regular season games. It's been a number of years now when somebody was sick or whatever was going on. And you just have to trust your knowledge. You have to trust who you're working with. And it's like, I know the game. I know the stories. I know the people involved. When in doubt, take a peek at the Jumbotron. There's always a lot of good information up there if you don't have a chance to get all your stuff ready. And that gets back to what I was saying. Like, I know exactly what I need, when I need it, and how to put a pregame show together.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a rhythm to that. The spring training games, by the way, are more difficult because you're dealing with a lot of players coming into the game from both teams that you maybe have never seen before. And they may be in the minor leagues, and they may be not even top prospects, but guys that are just helping fill out the roster at that point. So that becomes a lot more challenging. And you might do interviews while the game is going on, lose sight of stuff, but it also is less about the win and loss at that point. So it's just adjusting and adapting to whatever you're doing.
Gotcha.
Joel, you're the second person we've had in this podcast so far that has been, at least to my knowledge, is also, from what I understand, a motivational speaker and has done speaking engagements. And let me just say that definitely shines through. I definitely can see that. And I understand you recently wrote a book, Small Ball, Big Results.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about why you wrote that book and why you decided upon that title?
Yeah. So I appreciate you asking that. I mean, this was the path that I never envisioned, right? Like, I mean, I never envisioned being the pre and post game show host of the Kansas City Royals, because when I was a kid growing up, there were no pre and post game shows. Now everybody has a pre and a post game show. So, but I always, like I said before, had the goal and the dream of being a broadcaster, whatever that looked like. I mean, I thought it would be being on SportsCenter or something like that. I think what I do now is a lot more fun to me, or a lot more of interest. But that's, I thought I'd be like the local guy in the news or SportsCenter. But I never thought about motivational speaking ever. And 5 years ago, it's not anything I would have thought of. And I will say, from the time I was 22 years old in my first broadcast job up in northern Wisconsin, all the way through my whole career, I was always asked to go and speak. I'm 22 years old, 2 months in as a broadcaster, not even 2 months, and I'm being asked to go speak to the local high school to a bunch of seniors that are 4 years younger than me about how to be a broadcaster. Like, this doesn't seem right. And so, you do all those things over the years, and church groups and Rotary clubs and booster clubs and blah, blah, blah. So that's just what it always was to me, was, community outreach. Hey, cool. Somebody wants to come and hear about what I do and the state of the team, and they're going to feed me some lunch too. That sounds all right. And about 4.5 or so years ago, I was asked to speak a couple paid speaking gigs, nothing much. And I didn't really think a whole lot about it. And then I was talking to a friend, and he said, that with all of your background and all of your access to the people that you are around every day, you could totally start a speaking business. And I looked at him like he was crazy. Like, wait, what? Like, I'd never lived a day in the business world in my life, so I didn't really know that existed. Like, when I tell this story to people in the business world, they're like, well, yeah, duh. I mean, motivational speakers, like, companies hire them all the time. I just didn't know. I just have never lived in the real world. And so I thought, well, that could be something kind of cool to do in the off season. I mean, for the most part, my off seasons are off, announce a little bit of hockey, do a couple projects here and there. But for the most part, I'm sitting around on the couch and doing nothing. My kids are in school. My wife is working. I mean, I'm kind of bored. So I sort of went all in on it. And one of the first pieces of advice I got was, motivational speakers or corporate speakers, they write books. You have to write a book. So I met with a potential ghostwriter, because I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to even write a book about? And she says to me, you're not ready to write a book, start a podcast. And I thought, well, thank God, because I like, what am I going to do? Write a book about the world champion Royals, and that's going to get me speaking engagements? It doesn't make sense. So I started sort of a business podcast with a sports twist to it about leadership and culture. And I just started, initially every other week, then once a week. When the pandemic hit and I was out of work from baseball, suddenly I was doing one every day. And so, I had the opportunity to interview hundreds of people, everything from a under the radar startup entrepreneur with a cool story to the biggest name CEOs, some athletes in there, mixed in there too. And somewhere about 1.5 years ago, it just dawned on me. I'm like, you know what? I Well, one, my speaking started to pivot. It wasn't, and I was speaking a lot, and still am, and it wasn't just about baseball. It was about culture and leadership, like I said. But suddenly, my stories that I was telling, strategic stories, weren't just involving baseball players. It wasn't just this story about Albert Pujols and this story about the Royals championship run, or on and on and on. It became this success story in business, this failure in entrepreneurship. And somewhat early on in the podcast, I decided that I would ask all of my guests 3 baseball themed questions. But they're really meant to be business and life questions. What's the biggest home run you've hit? What's the biggest swing and miss you've taken? And what is small ball? What are the little things that add up to the big home runs in your world? Which was really a culture question. But the Royals had won a world championship in 2015 without the big boppers. They won by playing good defense and stealing bases and great bullpen and all the things that don't necessarily make the box score, the headlines. That was small ball. And so, bunting, sacrificing. And the answers to that third question were the most interesting. And that's when the idea came up. I'm going to write a book about small ball. And then eventually the title came. And during the pandemic, I'm like, you know what? Now's the time. I have it. I have enough. I have more than enough. I have much more than I ever imagined I could. So it's time to sort of put it all together. And it became a book about small ball, the little things that add up to the big home runs in baseball, business, and life, with every chapter being an inning, like a baseball game, and each inning being a topic. And so there's a top half and a bottom half. And so if there's an inning or a chapter on trust, then one half of the chapter or inning is going to be the perspective of, in the trust discussion, how it took me 7 years to build trust with Albert Pujols, and what I did wrong, and how to be better with that. And then the business side became, how does a brand new CEO of a company like H&R Block step in and build trust from day one when the company's struggling. And so that's kind of what happened with the book. So it was a lot of years in the works, and then many years without ever knowing I was going to do something like that.
So creative. I like the book format idea. Speaking of great books, I understand that you've read The Soul of Baseball by Joe Posnanski. My dad just gave that to me for Christmas, and man, that was an outstanding read. I really enjoyed that. I read Buck O'Neill's autobiography, and after that, I was right on time. But were you ever able to meet Buck O'Neill?
No, it's one of, I won't call it a regret because I didn't do anything wrong, but it's certainly one of my disappointments in life, because I never met him, and our paths never crossed. I know a lot of people that were not in Kansas City still had the opportunity to meet him, and I never did. But it's so interesting because I feel like I know him so well. I'm very good friends with Joe Posnanski, also very good friends with the president of the Negro Leagues Museum here in Kansas City, Bob Kendrick, who is featured quite a bit in that book, because he was on that journey with Joe and with Buck traveling around the country.
Right.
And I very truly believe that Bob is an extension of Buck. And so I've known Bob now for 13 plus years. He is hands down the best pregame show guest that we have on a regular basis, has been for years, always will be, because he's the best storyteller I know. So I feel like I know so much about Buck through the words of Joe Posnanski, through all my encounters with Bob Kendrick, through all the time that I've spent at the museum, which is something that I would recommend to any person to visit, whether you're a baseball fan or not, in the same way that I would recommend visiting any historical museum. And that's what it is. So, I do feel like in this really strange way, for a man that I never met, that Buck is kind of with me in some ways every day, just because I talk about him a lot. And, I feel pretty privileged to be able to do that.
It's amazing. He's had such an impact on so many people that never met him, on the whole city, really.
Yep.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think we're getting kind of close here, time-wise, but before we closed up, we wanted to play a little bit of a game, if you'd be down for this. I know John and I have kind of enjoyed just different announcers growing up, and enjoyed kind of different impersonations. So we're gonna play a little thing. We each selected some of our standout announcers, and we're gonna make fools of ourselves here and try to impersonate those
All right.
broadcasters, and see if you could tell who we're trying to impersonate here.
I like this because it puts the pressure on you guys, not me.
All right.
Well, you still got to guess, so we'll see.
That's true. Yeah.
If you get it wrong, though, it's probably because we're doing a terrible job.
That's what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, here we go. Here's number one for me. Well, we'll see who they bring out here on third down. And look at that. 58's at the outside linebacker position. He's out there. The last time he came out there, he had a big play on third down. So see what happens. And here's a snap. And he breaks through the line. Yoy and double yoy. He made a big sack. He knocked him into the third row. Yoy and double yoy. It's another 3 and out for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ooh. I don't think I'm going to be right here, but I was going to go Howard Cosell. But
Not great guess. Not Howard Cosell. This is so my mom's from Pittsburgh. Our mother's from Pittsburgh. So John probably doesn't remember this, but I was just old enough to kind of catch the tail end of Myron Cope's years as a Steelers. He was the analyst. He wasn't the play-by-play guy. But
yeah,
he had.
It's amazing too. Like when you hear those voices that are kind of part of your childhood, they stick with you forever. Right.
Yeah.
For me, it was a guy named Merrill Reese, who was the Philadelphia Eagles play-by-play, and he still is to this day. So when I hear that every now and then, it brings me back to my childhood. I didn't think it was Cosell. I figured it was something Steelers related. Just based on who you were saying, but I had to come up with something.
There you go. Yeah, he's also the inventor of the terrible towel. Fun fact.
Very nice.
I didn't know that. All right. Next one here. This one's a little bit shorter, but it's just. Oh, it's unbelievable, baby!
Oh, that's Dick Vitale. I interviewed him last year too. He was great.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow, super cool.
Dickie V's been at it since I was in college, and even before. So I think he's early 80s now, and his energy is still. I mean, we had him on a podcast, a different podcast that I was on last year, and he loves baseball too. It was actually a baseball show, and he loves baseball. But I'll tell you what, like I don't know how he does what he does at that age. Like he's still. Whatever he's done to slow down, and I'm sure he still has it. So, yeah, that one that was an easy one because that's sort of an iconic national one.
Yeah. All right. Well, this next one you might find a slam dunk too, but we'll see here how I do. Man, the Lakers are terrible, man. They're absolutely terrible.
That's Charles.
Terrible. You got it.
Yeah,
they're all knuckleheads. Yeah,
Charles is and Shaq and all those guys for that matter I don't even think you need to be a huge NBA fan, and I'm not. I like the NBA. I don't love the NBA as much as I did it as when I was a kid, in part because I haven't lived in an NBA city now in 30 something years. But that inside the NBA on TNT is the best sports show on television.
Yeah, well, it's high praise. It is entertaining.
That to say the least. Yeah. We've got one more basketball related one. I think that's the end of that. But then, all right. So this one's also kind of short, but drives up the court, takes it back, kicks it out to Allen for 3. Bang! He nailed a 3 from the corner, and the Heat take the lead with a minute to go. Kicks it out. Nowitzki for 3. Bang!
It's not Marv Albert, is it? Or
no?
Kevin Harlan?
No.
All right. I don't know this one.
Yeah, it's Mike Breen.
Oh yeah, Mike Breen. Sure.
Yeah, the bang, I guess, is his big.
Yeah, the
thing.
bang. Yep.
All right.
I told you I watch less NBA than the other sports, but Mike Breen does do a good job.
Give me a bumps here, John. I do have one more basketball one left here. This is more, I guess, maybe a famous call than a famous announcer, but see if you know this guy. And there's 2 seconds left. The Celtics are only up by 1. Here's the inbound pass. Havlicek stole the ball. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over. The Celtics win. Havlicek stole the ball. Havlicek stole the ball.
That's an old school one too.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking right now. Who was the old Celtics announcer? All I have in my head right now is Red Auerbach. It wasn't Red Auerbach, obviously.
Yeah. I knew the call, but I had to look up the guy's name is Johnny Most.
Oh yeah, sure.
That call.
Yeah. Legendary Celtics announcer. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And I can picture the play too, but yeah, I didn't do well on that one.
Okay, now we're done with the basketball. Okay. So next we have, and you're looking live at the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida, for the showdown between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Clemson Tigers.
I'm thinking it's Keith Jackson. No,
not quite. Yeah, there's one that I can't remember what he said for that call now. There's one other one today.
it's not Pat Summerall.
No, it's 4th down. He went for it all, and he got it. Touchdown. That's probably not
My
going to
mind
help
went
too
to
much
Keith
either.
Jackson for college football. I don't know.
Yeah. I was trying to Brent Musburger.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Not
That's good.
Brent.
Yeah.
Brent was a classic. I don't know why I just heard like in my head I started hearing Keith Jackson's voice.
Mhm. Yeah.
But
it's not quite as distinctive, I guess, or harder to
yeah.
not as distinctive an impression, I suppose.
I'm not doing very well.
All right.
I got
This
some-
one. This one I can't impersonate very well, but it's also like a classic play. So, and when you look up who's coming up to bat, here he is, number 42, and we'll skip ahead a few pitches. And here's the delivery, the 1-2 from Eckersley, and that's a high fly ball to right field. It's going to be out of here. In a year of improbability, the impossible has happened.
Well, that's Vince Scully.
You got it. The great one.
Nailed it.
The greatest.
Yeah.
You got one more, John?
All right. Yeah, I got one more. All right. And there's a fly ball. It's back. It might be. It is. Holy cow, a home run. And the Cubs take a 1-0 lead.
Well, that's
here.
Harry Carey.
Yeah.
Classic baseball voices right there. Tune around.
I don't have a larger pair of glasses, or I would have put them on.
Yes. Yeah, maybe a Budweiser.
Here's my last one. This one I had to look up, but it's I love the call on it. And I'll give you a hint. This is it'll be obvious from it, but this is dipping in the college football archives. And here's the punt. It's a high one, and it's fielded by Johnny Rogers. He's hit, but he's still up. He's at the 40, the 45, the 50, the 45, the 30, the 35, the 20, the 25, the 15, the 5. He's in the end zone. Holy moly, man, woman, and child. Did that put him in the aisles? Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore him loose from their shoes.
I don't know who that is, but that's the best one you've done.
Thanks. It was a guy named
Save the best for
Lyle
last.
Bremser.
Yeah.
He's the Nebraska play-by-play guy back in the 70s. But I was looking through fun announcements.
Yeah, I wouldn't have really followed his broadcasts, although Nebraska was legendary, obviously, back then. Not so much anymore, at least for now.
Yeah, not so much.
But that was I think that was your most enthusiastic one so far. Adam.
Thanks. I am kind of rehearsing here for bigger and better things one day.
I like it.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think ultimately you got like 4 or 5 of that, which is way better than I expected. Way better than I think I would have done seeing him blind, like easy sitting on this side where I know what's coming. So.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thanks for playing along with us. Having some
I'm
fun.
happy to.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So I think we're close to wrapping up here. We sort of have one final question, something we love, similarly to your podcast, something we like to ask everyone. A little more general though, but so just open question: why is sports important?
Oh yeah, it's such a good question too, because in the grand scheme of things, John, I mean, it is just a game. It's not life and death. I believe that there are a lot more important things in this world, although sometimes it feels like we make it life and death. But, I've learned along the way that sports, they mean something maybe different to everybody. And, some people don't even like sports. That's fine too. But the power of sports and what it can do for people. It may be a diversion or distraction from life. And I've come to learn this over the years and I talk about this when I'm speaking to groups, about the impact that you can have on other people and finding your purpose and why do you do what you do? Like, it's very easy if people say, why do you do what you do? What's your purpose? Well, I'm living out my dream. Okay, well, what's the purpose? Right. But then when you start to get messages in via social media or whatever other form from a soldier stationed overseas that'll say, hey, it was so great to watch the game last night. It was amazing. I got up in the middle of the night over in the Middle East and watched on American Forces Network. What a game. You're like, the game sucked. It was 13-0 and like nothing. It was one of the worst games of the year. And then you realize, but yeah, they woke up at 3 a.m. and maybe they were missing home or maybe they were missing their family. And this brought them a little bit closer. Or get a message from someone that'll say something like, my grandmother's in the hospital or she's in hospice and she doesn't have much longer. But the one thing she looks forward to in these final days is watching your guys' broadcast. And it's like, man, that's not about wins and losses. That's about entertainment, a distraction, a connection to a team, to a city, to a person, to a cause. And so I think that's really what sports does more than anything. And it brings people together. I mean, when I came here in 2008, Dayton Moore, the general manager then and still now of the Kansas City Royals, said to me, he said, I'm trying to build a culture here. And I remember thinking, boy, I mean, it's the last place team. And like, how do you do that? And he said, I'm not just talking about the 25 guys in the locker room. I'm talking about the ticket takers and the vendors and the parking lot attendants and, the accountant and everybody involved in the organization. And that includes the fans. And then when I watched the Royals win in 2015, there were 800,000 people in attendance for a parade. We don't have 800,000 people in this town. And you could just see what it meant to them. So, I think we get caught up every day in wins and losses and performance, just like the rest of life. But I just think it's so much deeper than that. And I think when we keep that perspective, that it's a powerful one. I mean, it's all interesting storytelling, and it brings people together. That's to me what sports is about, and it lends to some great rivalries and some disputes and arguing with friends, sometimes even family, like a Cubs Cardinals or a Packers Bears or a Chiefs Raiders or whatever it is, and it's pretty fun.
Absolutely. Like you said, it brings people together. Such a great unifier. Glad to hear you say it. Before we get off, Joel, you mentioned your book and your podcast. How can people access the book? How can people listen to the podcast?
Yeah, the easiest, for podcasts, just search Rounding the Bases, and you go to wherever you find your podcast, you'll find Rounding the Bases. And on my 6th season of that show right now, and a lot of cool guests coming up. So that's and archives full of old stuff. And in the book, of course, you can get the book on Amazon, like you can get anything else. It's called, again, Small Ball, Big Results, or my website, joelgoldbergmedia.com. And then I'm on social media and all that stuff too. But you can get anything through the website or get pointed in the right direction there. And like I said, podcast, very easy to find.
Great. joelgoldbergmedia.com. Check it out. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Joel. This has been absolutely a pleasure, and really, really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, guys. Adam, John, thanks so much for having me on. Great to hang with you guys today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. From the mountains of Maryland to the banks of Missouri, thanks to all our listeners from points in between and not in between. Until next time, he's John and I'm Adam. Stay classy, Frostburg.